Welcome CPS to this webinar. This afternoon, we are looking at emotional intelligence for professional and business success during and after COVID-19. As we all know, COVID-19 has impacted many lives, many businesses, many professions. And recently, we have had a number of webinars looking at the technical subjects. We are now looking at the soft skills in order to manage this COVID, which is still around, and even when it has gone. And when you look at emotional intelligence, I was searching the definition, and the definition that I looked at was, it is the capability of a person to manage and control his or her own emotions and possess the ability to control the emotions of others as well. So if you're in business, if you're in a profession, you should be able to control your emotions as well as influence the emotions of the other people around you. And for this afternoon, we have two experienced panelists who will take us through the topic which I've just read. And I now have the honor of introducing them. To begin with is CPA Andrew Bradford Kawere, whom I have known for very many years. I think I first came to know Andrew when he was an A-level student and we had gone to do a career guidance outreach at St. Henry's College, Tovu. And after our career guidance outreach, he immediately, after his A-level, he joined CPA. Andrew has extensive experience in audit, accounting, banking, and finance, which he has obtained from various organizations, both public and private. He started his career, I think around 2003, in public practice with KPMG. And I'm glad that he's sharing the platform with his mentor, CPA Gaisingoma. From KPMG, he moved to East African Development Bank and eventually to Bank of Uganda. Andrew has served as Deputy Director in the Bank of Uganda, in the Supervision Directorate, and specifically in non-bank financial institutions department. I don't think he has closed any institution. So we think we will nurture the institutions to grow. The department is charged with the oversight of non-bank financial institutions, such as microfinance deposit-taking institutions, money transfer companies, bureau de change, and large savings and credit cooperatives. In addition to his accountancy career, he has pursued other parallel careers. Particularly, he has been a visiting lecturer with a number of institutions. I know he's been teaching, facilitating on the MBA programs at MUBS, or Makerere University Business School, then on CPA and SCCA at Matt Abacus Business School. Andrew has also served on the industry and business panel of the professional standards of ICPAU. And he has also represented ICPAU on the National Information Security Advisory Group. Andrew has a lot of, he has a very rich CV. If I was to read the entire of it, we might spend the whole afternoon. In short, he has a career spanning 17 years. Ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcome Andrew. The next presenter is Edgar, CPA Edgar Isingoma. Edgar Isingoma is currently a partner leading KPMG advisory practice both in Uganda and Rwanda. He's also a member of the Institute. His expertise extends to fund management, having led KPMG's engagement with DFID funded Access to Finance Rwanda and Financial Services Inclusion Program in Uganda. So in this role, he has helped to establish 2 financial inclusion focused programs and transition them into successful independent entities that they are today. CPA Edgar specializes in due diligence and pre-award assessment and has led the KPMG team in monitoring the energy sector in Uganda on behalf of the Norwegian government, in addition to helping carrying out value for money reviews of World Bank funded projects in Uganda and Ethiopia. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 2 fantastic presenters and get ready to listen to them. I now invite our first presenter, CPA Andrew Kawere, to make his presentation. Before he comes on stage, if you have any question, please record your questions under question and answer under that tab, then we shall be able to pick them. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm glad to be here to share perspectives on emotional intelligence. I will begin by thanking the Institute for these opportunities, to virtually share knowledge and thoughts on topical matters during the current pandemic. May I also say that I'm particularly honored to be comparing perspectives together with my senior colleague Edgar, who, like John said, is indeed one of my many mentors. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to sharing and learning from everyone on the platform. Colleagues, the COVID pandemic started as an epidemic, probably in China. And at the start of it all, nobody knew that we would be where we are today. As early as December, the world press was awash with reports of this, pandemic, which was an epidemic then, big it would end up, or how much it would affect our lives, in some cases permanently. So it is really pertinent that we reflect on the emotional implications of this pandemic, especially to us as accountants and finance professionals. My presentation, which Peter is going to project, is going to run on 3 themes or subtopics. We're going to talk about the effects and the expected after effects. Secondly, we'll talk about emotional intelligence, its facets and the relevance. And thirdly, we shall talk about the aspects that I think we need to consider if we are to build emotional resilience over this period and after it. Peter, if you could project slide 3. What do we know so far? In terms of the impact at global level so far, generally speaking, there has been disruption of supplies, disruptions in the supply, and significant reduction in demand in some sectors. There has been a reduced, need for consumption of goods and services. We've seen major declines in tourism, major decline in the transport sectors. So this is really what we're seeing. And at global level, if we could move to the next slide, the IMF has projected that the global GDP is going to fall by approximately 3%, and that's about $3 trillion in 2020. The recession that we are going to see, according to the IMF, does not in any way compare to what was seen during the global financial crisis, and it is perceived to be the worst since the Great Depression. Most of the advanced economies are going into recession, or at the very least, they're going to see a significant contraction in terms of their GDP. The US, of course, which is the largest economy globally, is projected to fall by 5.9%. This is about twice the rate that was registered following the global financial crisis. UK is projected to contract by 6.5%, Germany 7.5%, Brazil 5.3%, Sub-Saharan Africa at about 1.6%. I think the African economies, particularly the Sub-Saharan Africa, is getting the least hit from the pandemic. Peter, if you could project slide 3, please. Now, ironically, China and India, which are key players in the emerging markets, are expected to register some modest growth of 1.9 and 1.2% respectively. But other than that, we have also seen major collapse of global commodity prices, and I will particularly cite oil. The oil futures, if you recall, sometime last month, prices went into negative for the Texas index. Okay, and the prices have moved upwards since then, but it is still low compared to the highs that we have seen in recent years. I think oil is currently at about $35 or thereabout. We've seen erratic movement in stock prices, with major global stock indices fluctuating significantly, but also registering fall between January and April last month. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, the FTSE, the Nasdaq has grown up, and unlike the others. But overall, the global markets have significantly been disrupted with price changes. If you could go to slide 4, please. So what then are we seeing in terms of policy response? Before I talk about the policy response, I would like to highlight the fact that this crisis started as a health problem, but as we speak, the effect has been magnified and blown over into so many other sectors. In fact, in many countries, it has turned into a full-blown economic crisis with likely severe effects, not only in the financial markets and banking, but even in other aspects of the wider economies. So as a result, the general policy response that we see has moved from just being monetary policy response, like we saw in the global financial crisis, to geopolitical interventions. We are seeing a lot of physical interventions from not only the central banks, but also from the treasuries and ministries in charge of finance.
No, feeling good, and then the next day you suffer.
If you look at what we have on the slide currently, go back, please.
You want to eat yourself to the ground.
Can you go back, please? Let's keep it there. In terms of interventions, one of the key things I will highlight is
answer that one. Tell them where I've gone. I'm going because I'm attending a webinar. I have a meeting.
I was saying the reduction in interest rates is one of the most pronounced interventions that we have seen from the central banks. In the US, rates were cut to 0. You remember, in March, I think. In the UK, we saw rates going down to about 0.25%. China has done the same. And in addition to that, certain central banks, such as the Bank of Japan, have intensified asset purchases to be able to pump liquidity into the economies and prevent, a cut of credit and liquidity support to the institutions. In Uganda, it will be an injustice if I don't talk about my employer, but Bank of Uganda also responded. In April last month, the central bank rate went down to 8%, which is a record low as well. And of course, there have been a lot of other interventions in terms of credit relief for the financial sector. At multilateral institution level, the IMF has put aside 50 billion to support member institutions in an emergency fund. The World Bank has put aside 12 billion, particularly for developing nations. So we see a lot of interventions, both from the fiscal and from the monetary side. In Germany, there has been a tax break offered, special loan schemes for businesses. In the US, we've seen food support, just like we've seen here in Uganda. There has been food support to US citizens. Of course, the popular Trump check, you remember the $1,200 to the Americans. So there has been a lot of support coming through from governments in terms of intervention. However, as we about to move to the next slide, I want you to take note of the effect on employment. In the UK alone, about 1.6 million has been furloughed, with government paying 80% of the wages to a maximum of £2,500, while in the US, about 38 million have filed for unemployment. Now, that is a key statistic because in the recent past, we've not had such high levels of unemployment in any of those countries. Now, if we get closer to home, like you can see on the slide, 400,000 jobs were reported at risk, and that was in April. But as recent as early May, the reports were that 4,200 companies had closed over the COVID lockdown period, okay? And in terms of GDP, the IMF projects that Uganda's GDP for 2019-2020 is going to fall to about 3.3%. Now, this is half of what was projected earlier for the same financial year. And of course, like every other country, we have seen major disruption. We have seen major disruption in imports, major disruption in exports, and this has led to fall in demand for goods and services. We're going to see, of course, normally gets about $400 or $500 million coming through from the diaspora. So that line is being cut off. And in the end, we are going to see an expansion of the fiscal, we're going to see an expansion of the fiscal deficit, which means government unable to fully meet its budgetary expenditure. Now, if we move on to the next slide, I want us to now look at, well, this is a perspective from a Ugandan research study. And the EPRC recently found that about 3.8 million workers will lose jobs temporarily if the current pandemic persists for the next 6 months. And that is a very, very big population if you look at that as a percentage of the adult Ugandans. In the next slide, I again share some reflections from what I found in my research. The Washington Post reported recently that the corona pandemic is pushing Americans into a mental health crisis. In the UK, it was reported that 41% of the population is at risk, specifically because of the COVID pandemic. In fact, for the US, they reported an increase in suicide tendencies, an increase in depression, and an increase in general unhappiness. My point, however, is the relationship between the mental health issues arising from the pandemic and our emotional intelligence, which is the crust of what we want to discuss today. The experts have found that ability to manage one's emotions is a variable that in some cases impacts on mental health. If we move to the next slide, the pandemic, particularly the lockdown, this lockdown globally has affected about a third of the world's population. And there has been report of increased unhappiness. There has been report of restlessness, anxiety, depression, and like I said, suicides, especially in the US. So how do we go out of this? How do we survive this challenge? How do we survive this storm? And my answer to that is that it's only those who are emotionally intelligent who will survive this storm. And this is not just individuals, but also companies, like we shall see later on. if we move on to the next slide, I want us to begin by reflecting on the visual, the picture rather, which says, I was dismissed after telling the night hill boss to wear a face mask. This is a story that most Ugandans will have seen in the papers late last week. But for me, it tells the emotional intelligence story at an individual level. First of all, copyright acknowledged. This is something I picked from the Daily Monitor. It doesn't show, but this is copyright to the Daily Monitor. However, in a nutshell, the story, as reported, was that this guy, a security guard, following a decree a directive from the president of the company where he is deployed from entering the premises because the managing director had not put on a mask. And that's in summary what the story was. But for me, it speaks about emotional intelligence. Why would you stop the MD? Why would you deny the MD access? Or if you were to do it, maybe there are better ways of doing it, ways that would not directly lead to an immediate termination of services. And that's, emotional intelligence in the simplest of terms. So from the literature, emotional intelligence is about how we understand our emotions, how we sit down and assess our emotional ability, determining how to respond under certain circumstances. So emotional intelligence is about appraising oneself, understanding one's emotional characteristics, and being able to apply those characteristics in working with others, in relating with others, and being able to manage social relationships. In the next slide, we look at some, again, literature, which is largely dwelt on works by Goleman. Daniel Goleman wrote a book about emotional intelligence in 1995. But a lot of work has been modeled around this landmark publication. There are 4 facets or components of emotional intelligence. The first one is self-awareness. Self-awareness is about us understanding ourselves. Do we know ourselves? Do we know our strengths? Do we know our weaknesses? Do we know our weak points? Do we really know, our emotional state at all times? Do we know our emotional characteristics and attributes? That is what self-awareness is about. And then you can expand it and talk about self-confidence. Are you confident of yourself? Are you confident of your abilities? Of course, you can't be confident of your abilities if you don't know your abilities as a starting point. Self-management. Having understood oneself, having seen and understood one's abilities and attributes, then we can talk about self-management. If you know yourself, then you can be able to control yourself. You can't be able to control your emotional response. You can't be able to control how you respond under certain pressures, under certain situations. Like the security guard we talked about earlier, maybe he needed a little bit more self-control as part of self-management. We've heard of stories of policemen in Uganda specifically, policemen shooting people after minor arguments. This is indicative of lack of self-control, and that is clearly something under self-management as a component of emotional awareness. There are things like self-initiative, self-achievement drive, optimism. These are all aspects that fall under one's ability to manage oneself and to drive oneself under this facet. The third element is social awareness. Now, social awareness is about being conscious of the others around us. You'll be in an office and you have somebody who doesn't listen to others. You may have somebody who shuts down everybody else. Now, that's lack of social awareness. We have to be able to appreciate that we live in a social world, and we don't live in an island. So you must be aware of the emotions of others. You must be aware of the needs of others, and you must react to those needs aware of how others are going to feel when you react. You can talk about empathy under this. Are you empathetic? Do you have that feeling of, of understanding in terms of what others feel or what others could be going through? And then you could also talk about service orientation. How do you serve others? Do you mind about others? Do you mind about those who are less fortunate? And the COVID lockdown might be an opportunity to reflect about service to others in terms of taking care of the unfortunate communities and neighbors. The last facet is relationship management. Now, this can only happen if the other three elements have been taken care of. You must be aware of yourself, then you manage yourself, then you build social awareness, and when you combine those three, then you can say you're going to manage relationships with others. Now, under relationship management, of course, you can talk about leadership. If it's a company, you need to see the leaders standing up, to provide leadership to the people they lead, and that's emotional intelligence. You can talk about conflict management, and that goes hand in hand with team dynamics. You must be able to understand the dynamics of the team, to be able to build team productivity, to be able to build and get the most optimum output from a team. But you can't do that if you are not emotionally intelligent. You can't do that if you've not gone through social awareness or even awareness at an individual level. Now, in the next slide, I want us to throw some reflections about this subject further. In the next slide, I want us to think about these questions in terms of self-awareness. One, am I aware of my emotional tendencies? If you could project the next slide, please, slide 11. Questions are: one, am I aware of my emotional tendencies? How do others see me? Am I confident of my abilities? And like I said, as far as self-awareness is concerned, a personal SWOT is a key starting point. A personal SWOT is a key starting point for one to build self-awareness. Secondly, when it comes to self-management, you may ask yourself, do I talk or remain silent or express my opinions or emotions appropriately? Many times you sit with a friend, you sit with someone in a meeting, and somebody just says anything anyhow, things that are not appropriate. That is a question of self-management. You may also talk about adaptivity to change. The era we are going through is a period of change, most of which is actually painful change. So we need to manage ourselves to be able to go through this painful change as part of emotional intelligence. You can talk about social awareness. While I express my emotions, do I take clues from those around me? Sometimes we get non-verbal communication. Am I able to pick that up if I were the person speaking? Do I appropriately read that non-verbal communication so that I adapt or I change my approach? Am I aware of others' feelings towards me? Am I aware of the feelings that the others are showing? So this is very, very key, especially for team leaders. This is very, very key for senior executives. We must be mindful of the needs of others. We must be mindful of the needs of the people we work with, so that we build strong, lasting teams that can deliver productively. Lastly, on relationship management, do I maintain positive relationships? Companies are laying off people. Companies are putting people on half pay. This is a time where you must manage your relationships very, very carefully so as to retain your social networks, so as to retain, those key business contacts and professional contacts that you need to go through these very tough times that we're facing. Now, in the next slide, I want us to think about particular things that I think can help us to build emotional intelligence during this COVID period and much later going forward. These are things that I really want us to take from my presentation, because this is, you know, these are very, very practical things that I think will help all of us to go through this painful period. Number one, let's be innovative. Now, I'm speaking to, firstly, to those who are employed. Can you let your employer get value from you? Instead of whining or whining and, you know, complaining about this and that, can you provide value? Can you propose solutions to the current challenges that your employer might be faced with? So you need to be innovative, okay? And that's to support process improvements at your place of work, support your employer in these tough times, so that you jointly come up with innovative solutions to the challenges that are being faced by institutions. Be flexible in the adversity. You need to adapt to new work methods or new work settings. There was a story in the papers just a few days ago, but I think I also saw a similar story on CNN last week about changes to office space. Okay, things like seating arrangements may change. You know, things like how much office space is let out may change. And for these, we must be flexible. We must adapt to the changes. Working from home, staying home, working from home remotely are things that we have to adapt to. I saw a certain chat somewhere, and somebody was saying, how am I going to work from home, yet I have to pick and drop my kid to the school, which is close to the place of work? And I said, this is emotional intelligence. The current circumstances require flexibility amidst the adversity. Let's focus on the positives. There are so many negative stories going around, and so many facts, by the way, that are negative. But can we look for the positives in there? Can we see the glass as half full as opposed to seeing it as half empty? And the best example I could find was the question of family time versus hectic office routines. I've spoken to so many people who have indicated to me that one of the best things they've got from this pandemic was more time spent with family. Of course, some have not had that opportunity, but that is an example of looking at the glass as half full as opposed to seeing it as half empty. Let's be empathetic, okay? This will promote team cohesion and enhance productivity. Now, empathy, like I said earlier on, is about being mindful of what others are going through, okay? There are people who have lost jobs. There are people who are getting half salary. There are people who are unable to feed their families, okay? So for such a person, you know, it won't augur well with them if you brag about failure to maybe go on a holiday during the COVID pandemic. That wouldn't be empathetic if you are having a chat with someone. They can't feed their family and you're talking about a canceled holiday as your priority. Let's develop others, and that is both on technical matters and social aspects. If we move to the next slide, we need to be able to consider ethical matters as well. Now, this is also quite key, because with such a pandemic, there is bound to be some pressure. There is going to be some pressure for us, especially finance professionals. And the examples I've cited are three. Many institutions are going through cost rationalization at the moment. There is a lot of corporate reorganization that is being done. Of course, the usual financial reporting aspects, audit and assurance matters will continue. But with this will come pressures, cost rationalization. How do you prioritize? Are you not falsifying a position to justify a desired direction? Okay, people could falsify a position to justify a desired outcome. Corporate reorganization, okay, company valuations, mergers and acquisitions that are going to happen after this. Are you doing the right thing as a finance professional? Financial reporting aspects, are we reporting the true position of the institutions we work for? And of course, for the auditors and those in assurance roles, Are we giving the assurance that is expected of us in line with the professional obligations? So we must stick to the ethical considerations and make sure that we don't compromise on ethics. Personal finance. This is a soft side, but very important. Everyone listening to me, I'm sure, as we speak today, appreciates the need for an emergency fund. People have always talked about the savings, investment, consumption triangle, but we've many times not taken the question of an emergency fund seriously until we had to hit the thing head on in this lockdown period. So personal finance, let's take lessons from it. Can those with entrepreneurial traits or skills explore the emerging business opportunities? Because their diversity has actually presented some business opportunities in some cases. E-commerce, for example, there are certain companies that are thriving because they're leveraging e-commerce opportunities. Jumia is an example we can talk about here. Amazon, and of course, those other online e-commerce companies. You know, those are entities that are actually tapping into their diversity by seeing an opportunity. Health products, hygiene products. In Uganda, for example, we've had people going into the manufacture of sanitizers. We'll now see companies going into the manufacture of face masks. Okay, so that is being emotionally intelligent by exploring into the business opportunities that are emerging. E-learning opportunities for the education sector are the other. I saw a story about virtual tourism being talked about, you know, by tourist entities. Now that is exploration of opportunities under the current circumstances. If you move to the next slide, these are recommendations from the American Psychological Association, and they're saying, one, take breaks from distressing news. You'll all agree with me that social media is one of the main sources of stress during the COVID lockdown period. And this will continue because it was there even before. There is a lot of unfettered news, a lot of fake news going around on social media, which unfortunately brings a lot of distress and general unhappiness to those who read it. So the American Psychological Association recommends that we need to take breaks from social media. We need to seek information only from trusted sources. Let's not just read and forward everything you find, and even without checking how authentic it is. Two, make time to unwind. Use this for doing things that you enjoy. Have a passion. You can't tell me that you've spent 2 months at home and you've not really taken time to enjoy the passions that you have at an individual level. So as an emotionally intelligent person, that is something to think about. Find a passion and use the extra time you have to build that passion, to spend time on things that you do enjoy. Of course, connect with friends and family. One of the biggest sources of stress during this period has been cut off from friends and family. There are people who have been away from their families for months. There are people who have been away from their social networks for a long time. So, connect with friends and family. Fortunately, there are so many online platforms that we can use to connect with one another. And this will help us to build and consolidate not only the professional networks, but also the family and friends to cope with the challenges we face. This needs no introduction. In the past so many years, personal health, body health has been an issue that we need to take care of, and we need to eat healthy and exercise regularly because this feeds into mental and emotional health. My final thoughts are in the next slide, ladies and gentlemen. We are going through unprecedented times, what we're going through has, nobody has seen this in this generation, I bet. Maybe if they're lucky survivors of the global pandemic of the Spanish flu in 1918, but I bet those are a handful. So things have changed, and our lives are not going to be the same in many, many respects, professionally, socially, and culturally. And the sad thing is that the full impact of this pandemic has not yet been reached. The effects are still evolving as we speak. So our lives have been altered significantly. And this has presented several challenges. However, there are also opportunities. But it's up to us. Do we see the opportunities, or do we strictly see the adversity? At company level, at corporate level, inevitably change is desired. Change must happen. And Edgar will tell you about this shortly. But at individual level, we must also adapt. If we don't adapt, if we don't change our thinking, if we don't open up to the new paradigm, to the new ways of thinking, we are going to lose relevance. We cannot be relevant in the new or in the post-COVID era unless we adapt, unless we open up our minds, unless we remain emotionally intelligent. So as I close, my final comment, which I want everybody to remember in case you've not picked anything, doing nothing is not an option. However, emotional intelligence will be a key strength for those who will survive the storm. The companies that will be emotionally intelligent and the individuals that will be emotionally intelligent after this period are the ones who will survive the adversity we are going through. I thank you very much for listening. Point as will be guided by the moderator. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Andrew. Andrew, you've made a very eloquent presentation, and I can see questions flowing in, but we shall hold them there until after the presentation of CPA Edgar. I now have the pleasure of inviting CPA Edgar to make his presentation.
Thank you so much, John. And I hope, John, if you are audible, definitely I'll be audible to the others. First, I want to thank Andrew for the wonderful presentation he has just completed now. This presentation, he has given us the context where this pandemic started from, what is its effect in terms of economics, globally, Uganda, and he has gracefully come up with some suggestions and borrowing also from American Psychological Association. Members, I want to start by saying that I'm grateful and honored to be here this evening, this afternoon rather, presenting this on emotional intelligence for the professional and business success during and after the COVID-19. I take it as an honor and as a privilege to talk to you. The last time I checked, you were over 500 on the webinar, and I really don't take it for granted that you have joined in and you are listening. I would like to ask to take this as a presentation which is following on what Andrew has just presented, and I will just much more elaborate and complement what he has been presented. The layout of the presentation, I will be able to look at the psychology of the crisis. I'll provide some context in terms of the examples of COVID society, and more so employees, employers, all ourselves. And then I've got what we need to do, actions being taken to address emotional aspects, and of course, what about post-COVID? What trends and implications are we seeing? And how best can we be able to move ahead? Members, the psychology of the crisis is we are living through unprecedented times. And most of us have never experienced such a crisis of a magnitude like this one in our lives. And this definitely is impacting all our roles, impacting how we work, how we live, our daily routines, our social and family interactions, and therefore it is expected that sometimes people are going to respond in an unusual manner. They may respond with anger, they may respond in fear, they may be stressed, and they may not listen fully. They may misinterpret information which has been given to them because they are overwhelmed. They may act out of unusual ways. And to me, what we are saying is we need to lead with empathy and put yourself in their shoes. From the beginning, it's important to put ourselves in the shoes of the people that we are working with. We need to think and listen to how they are professionally and personally being impacted on by COVID-19. The word personally is so important. Sometimes we just look at one side and we say, oh, it's only the economic side, but there are so many aspects which have affected our people. And only then can we be able to build trust, and stay connected to our people. There are 6 pillars which go through lightly, and because Andrew has already elaborated a lot. First of all, there are fundamental building blocks for a world-class client experience or any relationship experience. One of them is empathy. Connect with your people, employees, clients, even the boss, as a human being before talking business, before talking about work, before they talk to connect emotionally. Connect with these people. Personalize. Make a statement regarding understanding the environment in their current crisis and their responsibilities. You have seen what Andrew has been quoting of the security guard who lost a job and all that. Maybe he did not personalize, he did not understand the environment of the boss. Time and effort make it easier and quicker for your people to make decisions by providing expertise and consultation. Expectation, establish support, communication, evidence to help them think through the crisis. Commit to calls weekly, commit to communicating with them, provide people with real solutions, and above all, do what is right. I'm getting an echo. Someone else, I think we are not muted. And it is Derek. Derek, can you mute, please? Thank you. So from that perspective, as I was saying, integrity, do what is right to help them go through the crisis. Our research shows that investing in people, relationships, in times of difficulty like this one here of COVID-19, will be repaid by enduring loyalty. It may be your staff, it may be your boss, it may be your family, it may be your client, it may be your customer. This is what I'm talking about. Investing in that people relationships will mean a lot. And that's what we're following about as emotional intelligence. And firms that maintain ethics during periods of such a catastrophe grow and prosper. Andrew has already commented in terms of the ethics and all that. On the next slide, I show you the psychology of the crisis for you. When a crisis hits, on the next slide, there are 3 zones we go through. And the first one is the fear zone. People start fearing. What do I want to do during this COVID-19? People start transmitting anger and fear-related emotions. They complain all the time. They hoard information, toilet paper at home, medicines I don't need. And then they start forwarding messages in office to others, even when they don't concern them. They're in fear mode. And then you have to, they go to a learning phase where they have information which they can share, they acknowledge everyone is trying their best, they identify their own emotions, and they stop acting compulsively. And then we go into the growth zone. In psychology, this is what helps a lot. You should know that people will start from the internal area, then they'll move on to the fear zone, then they move on from the fear zone to the learning zone and the growth zone. We need to help our people to start going through that process so that at that time, they start being themselves. They find ways to adapt to the changes. They can be able to look through and say, COVID-19 is coming, therefore we shall be able to be in such a situation. So to me, this helps a lot to understand how people respond. The next slide, the impact of COVID-19. The impact of COVID-19 has been really, Andrew has gone through it. The socio-economic aspects, jobs have been lost, businesses have closed. Some sectors have been on a standstill, and this may continue for some time, like tourism, travel, etc. The economy is on the go slow, but some economies are already in the recession. Andrew has told us about that. The mode of working has changed. Family and work have converged in some jobs. Many of us at home trying to do all this. There's limitation of some activities and constraining of travel. But now the emotional aspects, uncertainty, has become a constant. And it seems to be now the normal. People are uncertain about so many things. Anxieties are very high, both for the employers and employees, and even for the public, including our customers. Separation from colleagues, even some from their families. Physical interaction affected. Other modes have been affected, have been followed. Feelings of lack of control. You are like, am I still in control? The concern for health and safety. Livelihood concerns for employees. Am I going to continue having a job? Am I going to contract COVID-19? What will happen to my family? And all that. Ladies, colleagues, and members, I want to bring you some vivid examples from the Harvard Business Review research, which has just been done recently. And I read to you the real aspects, and you get to understand exactly what people are going on in the next few slides so that you can be able to bring it home and appreciate what actually people are going through. As COVID-19 sickens millions, economies grind to a halt, our work, families, and communities have irreparably changed. Next slide, please. They have changed. They are, as I said, work and lives and home are messily colliding, messy. You are here, we are in this webinar, you are at home, a child, you are not muted, a child is coming in. We can't accuse you because work and home are messily working together. We are seeing high levels of pressure of work, to work harder and longer, or we are suddenly without jobs. These are the things we're talking about. And of course, our health is being affected. Some few quotes are here, and to me, the way we have been affected, that we are facing pressure from work. This is from the employee perspective. We are also feeling the expectation to be available for much longer work day than usual. This, we are seeing it, most of us. We are no longer spared. People are looking for us all the time. They will call you in the morning, and then at lunch, there's no lunch break. You get a lot of the people calling you to find out for the work. At night, some of us who work with jurisdictions like different countries, they'll be on your side expecting expectations. So these are the quotations you are seeing. I generally work remotely, so the work itself has not changed dramatically. What has changed is the expectation to be at all times of the day available. What used to be a 9-hour day is 11 hours or 12 hours with expectations to respond after all hours. You must respond. Another one is saying, sometimes I can't do as I'm so exhausted from the day's work because there is cooking, there's cleaning, and I do have to do my professional work. This is from a practice-study fellow. The next slide. So work and family are messily together. Now, things are hard at work right now. They are also hard at home, very much at home. A quote, being an introvert and suddenly having my family home 24/7, I need my personal space. Substantial drop in family income, putting pressure on my finances. All this cause stress and anxiety to people. I'm trying to balance my energy throughout the day so I can be a parent to a 5-year-old with autism and a communicator at this university. I see it as managing 3 big projects. I need to be creative, positive, and reliable in these areas. You can't believe. Too much household work, cooking, and husband doesn't share in the load. I hope my sisters, this also is to hitting you, it's coming home to you. My husband not responding. Next slide. We are doing our jobs from home, where many of us are also caregivers. People are also caregivers. And I was working in Switzerland, communicating back to Portugal, commuting back to Portugal every weekend, be with my wife and daughter. Now 100% home. Difficult to focus on the job while managing a 21-month-old kid, especially with a physician wife working at hospital. Longer but less productive days. I'm feeling like I'm missing out. There's less productivity, contribute less. These are employees. These are aspects, research has been done. Next slide. Some of us are struggling with no longer working at all. I'm not going to read this. People have lost jobs. People have lost jobs. The company I was working for, it took ages to respond, and then I was laid off, amongst many others. This is exactly what is happening. All these are causing psychological stress. They are causing anxiety. Next slide, please. Remote work can be challenging, especially when it isn't the norm. And that is true. It's challenging. You know what I had to do when I came this afternoon? I had to, as much as possible, to try and come with 3 internet sources. The first time when we are being introduced, I dropped off. One of my internet went down. I had to put on my other internet because I have 3 aspects. Because I knew I'm going to talk to so many people and I cannot afford. Now we are 541 on this webinar to say my internet is down and it has gone off. I had to have one from Africell, I have one from another source, I have from MTN, and I have 3 gadgets to make sure I'm able to be there. But how many people can be able to do this? So working from home with low technology capacity of most African organizations, this is from Uganda, and high cost of internet connection, it becomes almost impossible to fully coordinate teams. You can imagine. This is Golova, individual contributor from Uganda, and this is reported in Harvard. Now, next slide. Employers also have got their own issues, and this is a slide full. I'm not going to read it, but I know you're going to circulate these ones to you to make it up. In many cases, as employers, we are not able to take care of our employees in the ways they need right now. And that's true. You're not to be able to keep them safe, not to be having right resources with ever-changing situation. They are telling us now the lockdown has been lifted in Uganda in some few instances, but they're asking us to be able to try as much as possible comply with certain guidelines. A mask. Can you be able to provide a mask every day which is compliant for your employees, all of them? Social distancing, 4 meters, and all that. We are worried. We are struggling, and our people are struggling. So really, it's tough. And also, we are also worried as employers, that our people may lack money. They may not have resources. They may not have the connections. But also, we worry they are likely to burn out because they want to do all the work they can be able to do. A lot of them are trying their best. They can burn out. All this brings a lot of emotions to our own employees. Next slide. Employers. It is hard to provide direction when things are changing rapidly. And that is true. You're not being able to give them a sense of security. They're asking you, when are we going to start again to work? You don't know, because sometimes you don't know. Some companies have reduced salaries. They're asking you, how long will this one go on? As an employer, you don't know, because COVID-19 it's uncertainty hitting the whole world. They are asking you, when are you going to take us back to the other salary you reduced? So you have seen many organizations, salaries have reduced 30%, 40%, 60%. Some have been laid off. You can't provide that. And what scares right now is the inability to provide clear answers to all of this. It's very, very scary from the employer point of view. And we are concerned about making mistakes that could affect how much we are trusted. Because this trust relationship between an employer, a client, and a customer and employees, we are worried about that. How will be remembered throughout all this pandemic? We have laid off people. These are quotations. People have lost jobs, salaries have been reduced. How do they go about this? So those are examples I thought I would bring home some of the emotional aspects which I have researched on, and I will request Peter, we got that next slide. The emotional intelligence we have to deal with affairs. And you know, really, emotional intelligence has been defined, and emotional intelligence is that capacity or ability to be aware of one's emotions and be able to control them. It deals with the interpersonal aspects of relationship. That has been done. And today I want to talk about the aspect. Life is relational. Life in itself is relational. We relate with colleagues at work. We relate with bosses. We relate with juniors. We relate with clients. We relate with customers. We also have relationships beyond work. Families, public, and authorities. And this is where the emotional aspect is going to be. Not just work. There are many aspects, and that's why Andrew brought that aspect. You need to emotionally manage yourself. The self-awareness, the self-management. To me, the value and impact of emotional intelligence becomes very visible under such circumstances, such as those presented by COVID-19. Of course, we have borrowed a lot from Goldman, and I'm not going through that. The empathy, the self-awareness, and the heart of this, that closeness of trust and empathy. For me, we need to remain close to both the employees and employers and customers. This will build enduring loyalty. This is very critical for growth and prosperity during and post-COVID-19. As we practice all this, that closeness is so critical to build enduring loyalty for everybody. What we need to do, this is my next slide, and I would like to move ahead. Next slide. What do we need to do? So lead with empathy and build trust. That for me is so critical in everything we are going to be doing during this process. Whether you are an employee, whether you are a boss, whether you are a client, whether you are another person, lead with empathy and build trust. We are living in unprecedented times, and most of us, as I said, have never seen this, and people are not listening. And therefore, for me, think and listen to how each and every professional and person is impacted by COVID-19. That's only when we can be able to build trust and stay connected. We need to stay calm. Members, we need to stay calm in every situation, whether you are at home, whether you are at work, whether you are a boss, whether you are an employee, in whatever process, we need to stay calm. Breathe in. You need not respond to each and every aspect that is being asked at a certain time. You cannot. Sometimes you're going to make mistakes because of that. Be calm. Don't respond anger when you are angry, because these times you are going to be judged. And if you are the leader, and for us at KPMG, we say in an organization, everybody is a leader. Leaders are going to be made or broken by the quality of their decisions. The quality of their decisions sometimes is not the outcomes or outputs you see, but the process you go through. Did you take it when you are angry and you hurt so many people? It is important to stay calm. Next slide. We need to motivate through play, purpose, and potential. This is from the Harvard, where I picked it. And it's saying emotional pressures and economic pressures are soaring as people worry about losing their jobs, paying their rent, protecting their health. And Andrew has said this, the barrage of news, questions on how safely to get groceries, fears of relatives are deeply, people are getting distressed. Inertia for work is bound to increase as people wonder if there is a point in even trying to work. Harvard has identified 3 positive motivators that often to lead to increased work performance. But these seem to be in a danger under the crisis, and really that's why we need the same play. The motive that most boosts performance could decrease if it continues to become harder for people to get things done from home. Because you can, some things you can't get. For example, people may miss the joy of problem solving with colleagues or ease of making decisions when everyone is in the room. That's a reality. Purpose could also decline with teams decreasing visibility in their impact on clients or colleagues, especially if no one is there to remind them. But lastly, potential could decline if people can't gain access to colleagues that teach and develop them. These are real issues which are affecting people and their. So for me, what else? A little thank you goes a long way. I can tell you this thank you has made wonders to our lives at KPMG, to our lives in other areas. As managers, it's essential to express gratitude to our employees, especially now. For one thing, being thankful to your team is the right thing to do. Members, thank you, not just for the sake of saying thank you. It must come from your heart and it must relate to something that has happened. Don't use it to manipulate people. Someone must have done something, and please, a pat on the back helps a lot. People are battling with fears about the pandemic and juggling home and work. So when you give them a thank you, it helps a lot. Everyone needs to hear that their dedication is not, and it matters to the firm, it matters to you, especially when you are the leader, especially when you are the one who is called the boss. What is more, gratitude is proven to show improvements in self-esteem, achieving career goals, decision-making, productivity, and resilience. Those help in managing the emotional intelligence, because you are touching on people's self-esteem. Because they have been recognized, they become, the blood pumps. You know, when someone says, I know you have done wonders, someone will be, yes, the anxiety caused by pandemic will go away because they have been appreciated. Now, the next, which I want to see, is post-COVID. Post-COVID is the next slide, and I would want to go through this quickly to allow for more questions. Post-COVID phases we have gone through and which we are still going through. All organizations are going through these phases. When COVID hit us, we had a reaction phase. We went with a recession, then there have been a recovery, then there's going to be what we are calling the new reality. I want to tell you, no one knows what that new reality is likely to be. But I want to present to you what are the trends we are seeing in about 5 areas, and I'll just pick these 5 areas. The next slide. We are seeing that in terms of workforce, the next slide, please. We are seeing, in terms of trends, we are seeing in terms of workforce, appetite to maintain more flexible working patterns. People have tested the working from home. Now they want to keep working from home. Some of them, they want to have flexible working arrangements. And we are seeing this trend is going to continue. There is a need to reskill and redeploy large numbers of the workforce. We have realized technology has helped, but many people who are not technically well, they have not been able to prosper. Prospects for long-term change to how we work, how the work roles are valued. We are seeing these ones are changing. Rapid adoption of learning and use of technology, remote working and learning, preparations for safeguards. And as you see the indicators, 81% of full-time employees say COVID-19 has disrupted their life a great deal or a fair amount. And the percentage of full-time employees working from home because of COVID-19 closure has increased from 33% to 61%. These are aspects. But what are the implications? They need to secure and effectively promote remote working, which is very important for us. Effective mixed office and virtual working, including performance management. Managing people through disruption and effective employee engagement. Maintaining and supporting flexible working patterns with resilient governance structures. The way we have been governing has changed. COVID-19 has totally changed it. So we are going to see managing workforce becoming differently. We may have to redesign and align our HR employment policies and contracts because of COVID-19, because now we don't know what the future is going to be. Models that support cross-agency deployment are going to be developed. The need for platforms to support remote learning and education and so much and more. So our employees are not going to remain the same. Even the employers are not going to be the same. Society, we are seeing that trend where we are going to see people having to look for flexible working arrangements, and a lot may change. In terms of citizens, next slide, we are seeing citizens also changing. We are saying citizens will be increasingly expecting services to be delivered to them. This will be through digital. You know how banks now have all become digital. Tonse Mberera, please keep a distance, has helped us. The new virtual approaches, courtrooms, you see what has been happening. We are delivering judgments in courts, and this may become the normal. Faster move to near cashless society. You know, in Uganda, we have been used always cash. But now cash tally, we are using this, and people now are adopting. Everybody saying mobile money, use your credit card. The importance of citizen-centric design is coming out, such that people can be able to access all those. Of course, adoption of remote education and learning. You can see our children. What is happening? Things have changed. Forbes is quoting that cash use has all been evaporated, something that will leave the likes of Visa and MasterCard as the gatekeepers of spending. In Britain, cash use has halved in a handful of days in March. That was in March. Tesco at that time was reporting that 103% increase in online grocery and expects this to continue growing. So this has implications for video conferencing, delivery mechanisms, and all that. In digital, what are we seeing in digital trends? A move to digital service fulfillment by default. Step changes in remote working. It is going to, we are seeing these trends. Need to address cyber and privacy holes created by shortcuts taken to enable the workforce during the crisis. Many people did not prepare for this crisis. They just jumped and said, oh, we shall be working from home. But we are seeing now the cyber security. We used to say we are protecting our people on our network. Now there's cloud everywhere. Everything is in cloud. People are at their homes. So there's a lot of increased space in terms of migration to the cloud. And these things are going to continue to happen. And therefore, this one, according to Microsoft, the numbers using software for online collaboration climbed over 40% in 1 week. First-time installations of Zooms, mobile apps have skyrocketed 728% since March. Can you imagine? Even as we are now holding what I would call an annual ICPA meeting on Zoom, over 500 people are attending. We all had to do that. Things are going to change. We have to think differently. The trends are going to be very, very different. And then in finances, we are seeing a lot, huge spending on stimulus packages without a clear end date. You have seen what America has happened, trillions and trillions. UK is still spending out. In Uganda, we are still thinking. We know something is going to come out. The new crisis services being deployed quickly, a paradigm shift in government borrowing that will need to be repaid, reductions in tax receipts and demand-driven revenues. Kenya is an example, prioritization of health and economic outcomes. Those ones have happened. Now, the IMF estimates gross government debt across the rich world will rise to 6 trillion, from 6 trillion to 66 trillion by end of 2020. This is 11 times. I know this is I'm talking about trillions of dollars, not Uganda shillings. $66 trillion. That's what is going to happen. This is too much. And let's go to the operation as I try to go towards the conclusion. Of course, we are seeing rapid digitization of public sector services being welcomed. Despite emergency budget relief today, recognition that spend reviews are likely to lead to cuts, immediate reduction in discretionary spending. You see how government said, let us be able to do this. Governments looking to diversify supply chains that have suffered shock. You have seen people now. The president yesterday was opening up in Kono for us to get masks, a new factory. China closed, said no, we don't want anybody to be coming for this. We have to look after ourselves. So businesses will abandon up a fifth of their office space as part of permanent shift towards home working. So what happens with the space you have been having? Are you going to keep it? So you may have reductions, even in property, rents, and all that. And then policy and regulation being my last slide. What are we seeing in the policy and regulation? Increases in debt across governments, stimulus packages, corporate households. Most governments prioritizing national interest over global interests. America started with it when the campaigns of, during the campaigns of Trump. But now everybody is saying, people have become closing themselves off. China saying, don't come here, I have to serve my people. UK closing, US is worse. People are producing for themselves. And there's urgent need to supply chains review. Different industries and geographic regions requiring support to different extents. And the rate of growth in new approaches outpacing checks and controls. Because people are saying we must get these masks, we must get these medicines there, we must get to Mesphere to be able to treat our people. Are we going to go through all that? So rethinking the role of government is something which is, we see coming up as something which is going to happen. Economic interventions, data and evidence of policy decisions is going to continue. Dealing with the increasing inequality is going to happen. Rethinking supply chains, addressing capacity issues, and augmentation of non-tax revenues are areas we are looking at. Members, I want to thank you for listening to both Andrew and I. That is my last slide. And I want to really, I take it as a privilege to be able to talk to you this afternoon. I always take it as an honor to be invited to talk to my colleagues and my friends. I now take it back to John, the moderator.
Thank you, Edgar, and thank you, Andrew. There are many takeaways from these presentations. And for me, the biggest takeaway is empathy. We need to be empathetic. But I also realized that those who are emotionally intelligent took advantage of COVID-19 and grabbed the emerging opportunities. Those who are producing warrage are now producing sanitizers. Andrew talked about hygiene products. And I can see the cost of a mask now. If you buy 2 small masks, you could buy a shirt out of those masks. I have also seen some young people. They got their motorcycles and started food deliveries from markets to our homes. So there were many opportunities. I went to repair my bicycle, and the cost of repairing a bicycle is now very expensive during COVID lockdown. So ladies and gentlemen, I've seen a number of questions, which I will now present to our panelists. Let me begin with this one. There was Though we have seen a number of big companies in Uganda cut pay for workers in such a tricky moment of the pandemic. What would be the ideal advice to such institutions? Then I will read about 4 questions and respond. Is there any distinction between emotional intelligence and human relations? 3, assuming staff received pay cuts, this is related to the first one, and feel aggrieved to interact with the internal audit staff with the bias that the pay cut originated from the audit department. How should the internal auditor respond to such emotions? Then we have for CPS Stephen. He says, as we talk about emotional intelligence and using the example of the security guard, I think both the presenters alluded to the security guard at some company who locked out the managing director. How do we reconcile this with the framework within which we carry out our work as accountants? What if application of emotional intelligence is going to contradict a professional practice? Say, incorrect time filled on time sheets, yet individuals did not work for those hours because they left early to beat curfew. I think we can respond to those. You can agree amongst yourselves who takes what.
Okay.
The first person to talk about Andrew, so he's going to go first. Whatever he leaves for me.
Okay. Thank you, Edgar and John. I will comment on the first question. Cut of pay, institutions cutting salary, and the advice to the institution, rather the advice that we can give. I think the starting point is for us to understand that that things have changed. And one of the things I highlighted earlier on was that we cannot live in denial. We must begin by accepting that it is a new way of life. It is a new normal, like you've seen in many circles. And we cannot pretend that things are normal. So for a company that is struggling to make sales, a company that is struggling with liquidity, a company that is not making any money, I mean, if you are the CEO, you are looking at survival of the institution. And I'm not saying that the first thing should be cutting the salary, but you have to look at how the company survives. And what I would recommend is that a company does not go straight to salary, but sits down and looks at the entire cost structure. And then the rationalization is done all around the entire cost structure. So let it not be just a soft point to cut salaries, but look at the entire cost structure and rationalize all expenditures. It is not an issue because the company is looking for survival. So that is my take. Edgar will comment on that later on. Emotional intelligence versus human relations. I think human relations is just a tiny component of the other. Human relations for me would be just how you relate with people. It is just a question of how you, it is a question of interpersonal relationships with the others. How do I relate with people? But emotional intelligence, remember, is broader than just that aspect. We said you must know yourself, understand yourself. Are you aware of your emotions? And then build onto that to relate with others in terms of relationship management. So the former is a subset of the EI. Rather, the HR, the latter is a subset of the former. I think, Edgar, you want to comment on the other two questions, please? Maybe for the internal auditor, there was something about the internal auditor. I think for the internal auditor, again, this is about emotional intelligence largely, because at company level, the company leadership should openly discuss the dynamics at hand. If it is a question of company survival, then the leadership of the company cannot hide behind internal audit and say, these are proposals from internal audit. They've got to sit down and make everybody see the present situation. The company is struggling, no revenues or low revenues, and then the solutions are jointly agreed upon. So I see a problem from the leadership point of view, and maybe also in terms of relationship management for the internal audit team as well. Most likely, that internal audit team is not known for being value adding. I think you have built a name of being the source of bad news. So you need to work on your relationship as well. Edgar, please pick on from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I like that. Definitely, Andrew, you have done justice to the first two questions. The third one also was associated with that one. What I could add in terms of pay is, you see, when you are going through such a situation, integrity matters most. You need to be very, very open and transparent with your people in every aspect you are trying to deal with. People are very clever. If you are telling a lie, they will know that you are telling a lie. You are using the pandemic to cut them. But you need to be open and transparent and to know the purpose, that the purpose is to preserve the livelihood of everybody, not just the organization to make more profits, but to preserve the livelihood. And people in emotional intelligence, if people are taken through the whole process, you don't have to say it is the internal audit recommendations. It's no longer becomes us versus them. It becomes as we. I've been following trends on social media where the CEO asked, people have said, we have not had jobs for the last 2 months and we don't know how the pandemic is going to end up. And this was a company in Nigeria, which was a legal firm. And the people, they sat together and said, we are proposing, because of this pandemic, we want to protect jobs for each and everybody. We will reduce our salaries by 30% or 50%, and we shall be able to work innovatively, cut costs and all that. It becomes a decision of the employees. But what I see sometimes, employers fear to consult the employees, thinking they are not able to make such right decisions. Now, in terms of ethics and emotional intelligence, contradicting the profession, emotional intelligence actually enhances your professionalism. When you work with empathy and put yourself in the other person's shoes and know that this e-time, in the person of the client, in the person of my boss, he wants correct information, you will not be able to do that because you know it's a wrong to do. But also emotional intelligence and trust move together. So you need as much as possible to make sure they move together. So they cannot be there, contradicting the profession. Actually, emotional intelligence will make you work how much better as a professional because you stand in other people's shoes, because you are aware of your capabilities, you know how you can be able to manage in certain circumstances, and you know how best to relate. Chair, back to you.
Thank you. I'll pick the next set. In which situations today will an accountant, audit, tax expert demonstrate creativity? Now, this is specifically for CPA Edgar. What has been your experience during this COVID period, especially in relation to collection of audit evidence for those assignments that had to be done? So have you used your emotional intelligence correcting audit evidence?
John, you are too fast. When you are reading those questions, you are too fast. We may not.
Okay, let me go back.
Yes. The first one was on creativity.
Yes, the second one, which is specifically for you.
Yes.
What has been your experience? This is specifically for CPA Edgar. What has been your experience during the COVID-19 period, especially in relation to collection of audit evidence for those assignments that had to be done?
I'm breaking.
That's okay. Have you picked that?
Mangama mwajira.
Derek, your mic is on. then how do you deal with a business partner who not only lacks emotional intelligence, but also does not see the value of the same? This is rated. There is another rated one. They can be answered together. How do you manage a person who seems not to understand his or her emotions? It is rated to, this is Godfrey, it is rated to Julius's. If a company was already struggling before the pandemic, what are the step-by-step advice do you give to help out such a company? If a company was already struggling before the pandemic, what are the step-by-step advice would you give to that company? I think we can answer those.
Oh, there are many. I will start with the number 2 because the one of the team, I will leave it to Andrew. I will complement, but collecting the evidence, what has been our experience during this COVID-19, and especially when we have been able to work and all that. Our experience has been actually very interesting. We have seen clients which now have adopted to a situation where evidence is being uploaded on our secure online systems, and we can be able to get all that data and be able to do an assignment to a great advantage, a great degree. Actually, to over 90%, we have seen you can be able to perform an assignment during this COVID-19 when you are using evidence collected from the clients when they're giving it to you. 2, we have seen technology help us a lot in terms of collaborating this evidence, and banks have been much more open now, online platforms to be able to access. We have seen a lot being collected, and to us, actually, we are seeing it may even change the way we do perform our assignments, whether as audit, whether as tax, whether as consulting, because the technology in terms even of interfacing, we have seen actually it has even become more. We have seen actually people seem to be much more open in discussions during online discussions because they are not sitting with their boss to tell them that don't talk about the other. Because you connect online, we are getting much more broader discussions, better decisions, enriched in consulting, and much more evidence coming out of this COVID-19. So this to us has been a great thing which we are seeing. Dealing with a business partner who lacks emotional intelligence and does not value emotional intelligence is very difficult, very, very difficult. But emotional intelligence, I can tell you, first it starts with you. It starts with you, not with the business partner. You yourself, you know, if you put yourself in the shoes of the business partner to know they lack emotional intelligence, can you be able to introduce them slowly but carefully, doing what I usually call be intentional and deliberate in the way you are introducing for them to be able to understand these things. As you go to business meetings, they understand that when you started from the empathy, empathizing with someone else, with a client, with a customer, they come to learn from that. You're not going to, it's not going to be a telling story. It's going to be the doing and working them hand in hand, moving with them. They see, they don't need not to are good at emotional intelligence, but they will see the empathy working and building results for the organization. They say, oh, this one works. They will see the self-awareness, the preparations you go through, and to anticipate what is going to happen. They say, oh, this one actually helps a lot. And for me, really, that emotional intelligence starts with you. To be able to put yourself in the shoes of the other party, to be able to anticipate how they react. It's like self-control, because you cannot be able to push in the wrong direction and say, no, I was angry, I was pushed. But because you are in control, you can be able to move and be able to do some things. I will leave Andrew some of the questions There's one step by step, and then there is others, and even to add on what I have talked about. Andrew.
Thank you, Edgar. I will comment on the first one, which was about how a finance professional would demonstrate creativity. And one way, of course, you've touched on it already. One of the things that the finance professionals will have to do, of course, is working remotely, and that means making use of the technological applications, such as the platform we're using, to manage discussions, to manage communication with peers on finance matters. That alone is demonstration of creativity. Instead of you saying, we shall meet and discuss after the lockdown, use the available platforms to hold virtual discussions and virtual meetings. However, in my view, the value and creativity of a finance professional should be seen more in the boardroom. The current times we're facing are keeping boards of directors, awake overnight. So the finance professional, internal audit or whatever tax professional should be able to bring value to the boardroom table in terms of how companies are reorganizing their operations, in terms of how companies are coping with the new dynamics, things like flexible working hours. How do you pay staff, in flexible working hour arrangements? How do you manage hired office space that may not be going to have staff for the next so many periods? So I think I would see creativity along support to management in terms of managing the balance sheet, managing the financials to ensure survival and uninterrupted operations. If you are a tax professional, you need to explore the ongoing discussions. There are some recent budget discussions. Amendments to the tax law. You need to look into those proposals and see how best your clients can benefit from tax planning measures at this point in time. The other question was on step-by-step advice on a company that is already struggling. Edgar will definitely add a lot of practical experience to this. But I think the first thing is, like I said earlier on in my presentation, the first thing is to accept that there is a problem. So for a company that is already struggling, starting point is, do they really appreciate that they have a problem at hand? And that is a very, very key, because every time you live in denial, you cannot generate appropriate solutions to move forward. So for a company that is already struggling, the first question I would ask is this something that is understood by everybody? Does everyone understand that, yes, we are struggling and we cannot continue working the same way? So that would be the first thing. Now, after that has been cleared, then the question would be, what do we do next? If we accept that we have a problem, where are the problems and how do we tackle them? So that is as much as I can say off head. I don't know whether Edgar would add some practical consulting perspectives to that, because this is a question of approaching a consultancy assignment in the current times.
Yes. And I need fees after this to be able to go and so, but on light, that was a light joke. To me, definitely when a company is already struggling and is going to go through this pandemic, it is a double tragedy. Double tragedy in that you are facing so many challenges, and yet the situation is changing. You're not able to respond and know that having enough time and enough tools for you to be able to address the clear aspects. The first thing to do, as Andrew said, is to know where is the problem. To know where do I accept that I have a problem. And for you to accept you have a problem, the first step is to review your current situation and say, what is the root cause of my current situation before pre-COVID? Review, do what we call a strategic review. do a market review, a holistic organizational review. What was the root cause of my struggling? Is it the financial aspects? Is it the operational aspect? Am I in the right market? Am I having the right products? Are my staff, what we call a strategic fit? Are the structures and the processes aligned to the strategy? Am I operating in the right market? All that. Review a business model as it was at that time. And once you have done and reviewed and see the causes, now you will need to go the next step. You have to address the challenges you have, the root cause of the problems you have found out. And in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, prioritizing survival in terms of cash flow, you must make those steps which will make sure that you have whom we call the king in finance. Cash is king. You retain some degree of cash which will enable you to move through the pandemic. You take steps that will enable you to preserve cash and keep moving during this pandemic. You ensure that you keep connected to your people and explain to them how it's going to be, and being very, very open that you are in a situation which is precarious, the situation, we don't know how it's going to be in the future, but for you to be able to survive in the current situation, the steps of cash are going to be so critical for you to preserve cash and generate cash as you move ahead and look at the situations as they present themselves. But also you need to continue looking out and see what are those short-term opportunities that I can be able to capture even if I'm struggling. What is that I can be able to do and keep moving ahead? But also take a long-term view and say, post-COVID, how would I want to look? Actually, it may be a great opportunity that you are struggling and you are able to look after your institution at this time, and you can present it better post-COVID. I'll keep it there.
Thank you. This is for Edgar, CP Edgar. In the example of the 90 security guard, while self-control was key, don't you believe the lack of communication was the major source of the problem? As such, shouldn't effective communication be a critical facet of emotional intelligence in addition to the 4 you listed? So I think you have just mentioned communication, you're good on that. Then how best can an emergency fund be put to use? Companies do not want having redundant funds. They see it as losing value from such fund. Maybe we'll answer those 2, then I will give you more.
Chair, as you know, yesterday we had the first time in the town, and there was a rush to go home at one time, and people spent some time somewhere. I hope the questions, they will not go beyond the main as for now, and we end up shooting, but it's okay. The 90 example is actually, of course, it's regrettable. It's regrettable that such a thing happened, and we are linking it mostly to emotional intelligence, but there may be maybe other factors which could have led, maybe there was a relationship which was already sour and all that. But of course, to me, as the member has rightly pointed, definitely communication plays a very significant part. But communication both on the boss and also on the askari. But the way you communicate is what actually matters most. Sometimes the message you bring out can actually get lost because you are not emotionally intelligent. You have not brought it in context. You have not brought it with empathy. You have not been able to control the way you are bringing it out to the other party. So it is true communication in totality, such that the message you are bringing out is not being affected by the noise around the communication that you are making. So it is important, true, as another facet to add on, other than emotional intelligence, even the way you work. Of course, in life, emotional intelligence is not the only aspect which solves problems. Or you cannot say that I am emotionally intelligent, that is a panacea, that is the final solution for my best performance. There are many others that complement emotional intelligence. I apologize if you have been coming out and saying emotional intelligence is the only aspect. There are many other aspects which make an individual perform best in an organization or in any setting. Is this emergency fund, putting in place an emergency fund? John, I did not get this clearly. Does it mean the one for government, the one for the company, or what the real question I didn't get it? Did you want to get it?
This is for a company. If a company puts aside emergency funds, then it will be looked at as redundant funds and it will be losing value. So he says, how best can an emergency fund be put to use?
Okay.
Companies
Maybe.
do not, he says,
Andrew,
companies don't want.
Okay. Yeah, I think the context in which this was highlighted was at an individual level, because we all know how hard times have been for so many people. So it was flagged largely from an individual perspective as a question of personal financial management, as a lesson from the COVID and from the COVID period and going forward. But nevertheless, even at corporate level, especially if you bring into perspective financial institutions, companies that deal in finances, the question of emergency liquidity is out of, is a no-brainer. If you're running a financial institution, you definitely must have some emergency liquidity plans or contingency liquidity plan, such that in case you are hit with a pandemic, in case you are hit with a liquidity run or liquidity pressure, you're able to draw down on it. And you saw the central bank announcing that it stands ready to support financial institutions with emergency liquidity. That directly talks to the need for an emergency liquidity line, but from a financial institution point of view. But at individual level, yes, you need some emergency funding to deal with the rainy day, like it has been. Yeah, back to you, John.
Okay, John, I could add on, and in terms of companies which are not financial institutions, the sort of emergency fund which we usually deal with is what we call dealing with scenarios. Always, all the time, you must be able to having the optimistic, pessimistic, and normal mode of working, such that you are planning for that day when things are going to be pessimistic. And the approach we usually use is margins. You try to say that, let me see these margins if they are big enough to be able to accommodate me in such a situation. Then also the way you resource in terms of the institution, how you don't tie up your resources in fixed assets. You must have liquid, much more liquid assets, which you can easily be able to turn around as much as possible. It is the working capital management also, which you try as much as possible, you use in such a scenario. But also diversifying the sources of your income as an institution is another way of dealing with emergencies. But the emergency fund also could be there if it is regulatory to be used, like Andrew has actually said, in financial institutions. It could be put aside. Of course, there are not so many institutions, if they're not forced by the regulations to be able to put aside an emergency fund, because they're always thinking, let me invest it. But if you invest it, make sure you have scenarios, you have got different sources of income, you have diversified your portfolio of income generation, even at individual level, as Andrew said. You may have an emergency fund, but also it is also supplemented with somehow in form of diversifying your sources of income. Thank you, John. Back to you.
Thank you, panelists. I know we have many more questions, but people are mindful. I've been warned that there is a curfew and there is a lot of traffic jam. So we need to wind it here. But before we do that, I see a council member in the house. I think he will make a few remarks and we wind up this session. Some of you, CPA Constant Mayende, if you can unmute. In the meantime, some of you have been asking whether we shall send the presentations. As usual, we shall send the presentations. So, CPS, welcome our council member, CPA Constant, say a word.
Hello, thank you, John. I don't know whether I'm on.
You are on.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to say a word, and I think I'm going to restrict my word to giving a vote of thanks to our very able presenters for this afternoon. CPA Edgar Nsingoma, as usual. Thank you so much for giving us that insight, very, very well-researched insight. And of course, CPA Andrew Kawere for giving us, you know, a tutorial, you know, regarding emotional intelligence. Thank you so much, CPAs, and maybe to the other colleagues who are on the call. Please, I want to thank you so much for finding time to make it as we run through these webinars, which is now the new normal. And to avoid being caught in the curfew, I want to stop there and thank everybody who has participated. The Secretariat, thank you for putting it together. And good evening.
Thank you, CPA Constant. Thank you, our presenters, CPA Andrew and CPA Edgar. We are, I think, as participants, we are now more emotionally intelligent from today. Fellow participants, I want to thank you for participating. At one time, we picked at 540, which is a good gesture, which we would not have done ordinarily in a normal seminar. And I wish you a pleasant evening. If you are traveling, start your journey now. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Edgar.
Thank you, John.